Claude Mythos is finally here. Anthropic just dropped a new model called Fable 5, which is a Mythos class model, just with loads of safeguards built in, but it exceeds any model they've ever released, and possibly anyone. It is state of the art on nearly every single benchmark. Obviously though, this is definitely going to cost you, and they've done something a little interesting with the pricing here that I don't think too many people are going to be happy with. Now, normally I don't like to spend too long on the benchmarks, but this table is kind of insane. The jumps that this model is making on some of these benchmarks and the fact that it's ahead on nearly every single one. You can see it has a 10% jump at agentic coding on SWE Bench Pro, and it's basically 20% ahead of GPT 5.5. And it made similar leaps on the Frontier Code benchmark. Frontier Code is actually a new benchmark from Cognition, the guys behind Devin, that essentially tests would a maintainer actually merge the code that this model produces. On this chart, you can see Fable 5 is ahead of every other model, even at a medium reasoning effort, but I also think you can see this model is going to be super expensive. It's also marginally better at computer use, not a massive leap, and the same goes for Terminal Bench at the bottom, but again, as you can see, it's a leader in nearly every single category. One of the biggest things though that's becoming more and more relevant is long-running tasks. Fable 5 can apparently work for longer than any other model, and they had Stripe test this out, and apparently it performed a codebase-wide migration of a 50 million line Ruby codebase in a single day. Probably helped out by the fact that it's gone much better at memory and long context as well. It can apparently stay focused across millions of tokens in long-running tasks, and it improves its own outputs by using its own notes. Now, besides just coding, its vision capabilities are pretty awesome as well. Apparently, it can beat Pokemon Fire Red with a minimal vision-only harness now, whereas previously they had to give this additional tools, and it still barely beat it, but now it has no issue. It will also apparently happily one-shot a website from a screenshot. I actually tested this out using the Linear website, and it genuinely got a bit confusing for me which one is which here, but the one on the right is the one that Fable 5 generated from just a screenshot of the Linear website. It didn't use web search or anything like that. I just gave it a full screenshot of this web page, and I would say it's done a pretty awesome job at it. All of the screenshots, everything have been generated with code, and you can see it's done a very, very good job. It's things like the SVG animations that aren't going to be perfect, but overall, I would say I'm pretty happy with the way that it's recreated this website, and it's nailed pretty much every section, or at least got me to a point where I could then iterate on it to get it exactly how I want. While we're here, I also decided to test these models on building me a front end and a back end for a finance dashboard app from a completely empty folder in one shot. And this is what Fable 5 gave me. I have tested everything is working, it talks to the API, and overall the design does look really nice, it is really usable, but it is that aesthetic that Claude models seem to be giving recently. We can see that in the result that Opus 4.8 gave me as well. Again, I think this site looks really nice, and to be honest with you, I'd argue this looks better than the Fable 5 one, but again, it has that aesthetic that Claude has been trained on, but that is also my fault. I didn't prompt this to go in any particular design. I'm sure if I did, it would have done a great job. If we compare this to what GPT 5.5 gave me though, you can see it's just not even close. This was from a single prompt, the exact same prompt, and they're just miles behind in UI design in my opinion. I really hope the next GPT model does something about this. Fable 5 actually surprised me on that test by being the quickest. It took around 8 minutes to finish that finance dashboard, whereas Opus took 12 minutes and GPT 5.5 took 15 minutes to make that abomination. Besides just my demos, one of my favorite ones was Anthropic showing Fable 5 building a 3D printable CAD model in a browser-based CAD editor that Fable 5 itself also made. Like, building your own mini software is just so achievable now, and the same thing goes for drugs. Apparently this model is really good at drug design, but you probably don't need to know about that one, and yes, it's definitely safeguarded, as is basically anything that goes near cybersecurity, unless you're one of the enterprises in that special program. Fable 5 is apparently going to be really cautious, which means it's going to have a fair few false positives, apparently less than 5% of messages, but that still seems pretty high to me, and I've actually run into Opus safeguards before, so this one is probably going to be worse. Apparently though, instead of just saying no outright, it will try and send your request to Opus 4.8 first to see if it's safe for that model to do the work, but again, I've run into these safeguards before, so I'm not too sure how well that's going to work. This benchmark actually shows off just how insane those safeguards might be. Testing it on cyber evaluations, Fable 5 with its safeguards passes 0 of these tests. It just flat out refuses to do anything, and as I said earlier, if Opus sometimes rejects me with an 88% pass rate on this test, I see a lot of people running into safeguards with Mythos. The final thing to discuss then is the pricing, and this is where things get a little interesting. It's $10 for a million input tokens and $50 for a million output tokens, which I don't actually think is too bad. It's not the worst that we've ever seen, but what I don't particularly like is this next block. Fable 5 is available from today in Pro, Max, Team, and Enterprise plans, but then in a couple of weeks on June 23rd, they're essentially going to rug pull us and take those models away, and after that, it's going to require usage credits. Then after this, they say they're going to add these models back into those plans at some undetermined date. It just seems like an odd way of doing things, and I suppose their goal is to get you hooked on these models and then take them away from you and make you spend more money on them, and I think it signals just how expensive these models are for them to run. Oh, and it also uses your limits twice as fast as Opus, so I probably wouldn't set this as your primary model unless you're some kind of billionaire. The final footnote that I do think is interesting is their new data retention policy. To use these models, they actually require 30-day retention of all traffic on both first and third-party tools, and supposedly no training is going to be done on this data. It's just, again, to try and block security threats. So there we go. Mythos is finally here. What do you think about this model release and the future of software? Let me know in the comments down below. While you're there, subscribe. As always, see you in the next one.